All right, this is it. This is the last one. It is week 17, and we are here to pick every game against the spread. I'm Chris Haskell by Pete Prisco. We are also joined by Brady Quinn. All games taking place on Sunday. Ton of playoff ramifications. There's 3 spots up for grabs. Let's start with the Steelers and the Browns here. The Browns double-digit favorites. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Ben Roethlisberger is not going to play, Pete.
Yeah, and I think this number is bloated way too high. I really do. I think when you look at it, the Steelers, even their backups are pretty good players. I know they're not going to have Ben Roethlisberger, but this is the Mason Rudolph revenge game. I mean, aren't we going to buy into that? Look, he's not a good quarterback. But again, the Browns haven't played well. They didn't play well last week, and they didn't have the receivers, but they did not play well in all facets of the game. I thought their plan was bad for not having receivers. I think the Browns will win the game, but you're giving me 10? I'm taking a 10. I'll take Pittsburgh plus the points.
I hate to agree with Pete here, but I'm with him. I think that number looks a bit too high, especially considering there's a lot of concerns with Cleveland around still ongoing cases with COVID. There's some contact tracing. They're optimistic they will get some of those players back, but they just today had a coach and player go on that list. So we're not really so sure who will be available or who won't be. And if that is the case, I think this Browns team, as Pete has pointed out, they don't have the same depth that Pittsburgh does. And so they need all hands on deck to beat a really good Pittsburgh team who, look, they're going to sit Ben Roethlisberger. I wouldn't be shocked if TJ Watt doesn't play a ton of this game either, and some of their other star players, but they can't sit everyone. And so there still will be a version of the Pittsburgh Steelers that's out there that's going to play at a high level and doesn't want to let a rival, a division foe, a team that there's a lot of hatred between these two teams from having played in this rivalry, try to make it into the playoffs. So I think this will be a closer game than most think. I wouldn't be shocked, by the way, if Mason Rudolph doesn't actually have a good game. It's not about the revenge or anything else. It's about the fact that this offense has kind of underachieved throughout the course of the year, at least in the passing games at times. We haven't seen a full 4 quarters of playing at a high level. Maybe Mason Rudolph will bring that out. But bottom line is the Cleveland Browns, they will get a win. It will be close, but they get into the playoffs as a wild card team.
You see all the scenarios. Simplest thing is just win, but they're also in if Indianapolis loses, which probably isn't going to happen.
Not happening. I guarantee you that's not happening.
So the Cleveland Browns right now, according to Sportsline, have a 73% chance to make the postseason and end the longest active playoff drought.
Could you imagine, though, if they didn't win and didn't get in, that their playoff drought continued because of COVID? Think about that. They didn't have the receivers last week.
Yeah, they're having COVID issues this week, but don't you think a lot of that blame would go to Baker Mayfield as well? I mean, there's going to be pointing fingers at the players who are playing as well.
But I think they win, and they will go to the postseason.
Okay. And the Browns, they are a win away from doing just that and snapping that 18-year drought. Moving on to the Baltimore Ravens, who are also looking to clinch a playoff spot. They are hot, 10-5 at the Bengals. They are 13-point favorites in this game at Cincinnati. They clinch a playoff berth with a win or any loss by the Browns or Colts. And Brady, it's at 91%, and I don't think this is a team anybody wants to play in the postseason.
It's funny you say that, though, right? Because this is a team that's struggled in the postseason the past 2 years. And at the beginning of the season, we were saying, well, we know what they can do. They're a playoff team, but what can they do once they get into the playoffs? And now all of a sudden the narrative has changed now that they are a wild card team as opposed to being the division favorite and winning the AFC North division. So it is kind of interesting that that is the narrative of this team going into it. But I think because of the unique approach that teams have to take in defending and working against Lamar Jackson. And look, they're going to win this game. Cincinnati has nothing to play for at this point in time. I think they've actually been more competitive than I thought they'd be with Joe Burrow out. All that being said, this is an opportunity for their defense to tee off and take advantage, for Lamar Jackson to have a solid performance as they head into that wild card round and try to build some momentum. So I'll go ahead and lay the 13 points here, though. And this is also an opportunity where, if you saw last week with Baltimore, got the passing game going a little bit. I think this is another opportunity to do just that versus a really bad Cincinnati defense, Pete.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, Brady. I think that this team is the one that when they get to the postseason, a lot of the teams don't want to play because they can run the ball. If you look at the Chiefs, they've had struggles at times with the run defense. You look at the Bills, they've struggled with the run defense. Those are the two elite teams in the AFC. So you don't want them there. They're going to get there. They're going to win this game easily. The Bengals are playing consecutive road games. Or no, they're at home in this game, but they came off a game where they played on the road and played very well. Surprisingly, I don't think they play well here. I like Baltimore. I think Lamar Jackson's going to work on his passing, like Brady said, and get it right for the playoffs.
How much better has Jackson been, in your opinion, these last several games as opposed to the first half of the season?
He's been better. Not that much better, but he's been better, and that's a step in the right direction. If he can't pass the football, I don't care how good they run it, they're not winning in the playoffs.
Who's been better is Marquise Brown, who stepped up a little bit too, but also Des Bryant. Like, they finally got a guy who's a little more sure-handed, who's got the experience, and he may have slowed down a step, has a harder time separating, but he's a guy who's going to be in the right spot at the right time and knows what to do, and he's going to catch the football. So he's the other addition to this passing attack and this wide receiver core that I actually think has helped taking some of the pressure off of Marquise Brown, because he hasn't developed into the player that I think they drafted him to be, and I don't know if he ever will at this point. So we can put all the blame and onus on Lamar Jackson we want for maybe their shortcomings in regards to the passing game, but to me, much like people would talk about in regards to Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson's in a similar spot where I think if you provide him a true #1 wide receiver, you will see him statistically look a lot better in the passing game, much like Josh Allen has this year.
They have played the Jaguars and the Giants in the last 2 weeks, and this is another tune-up for the playoffs, but that's why you use these games at the end of the year. You needed to win them. They won them. They'll win this one to get in, but use them to tune up the passing game.
So there's 5 10-5 teams in the AFC right now. 4 of them will get in. 1 of them is going to be left out. The Ravens, according to Sportsline, have the best chance to get in. The worst chance belongs to the Miami Dolphins. Now, they're sitting there in the 5 spot right now at 10-5. Worst chance is somewhat relative because they still have a 71.5% chance to get into the postseason. There's just so many teams, so that percentage is up high. They're in with a win or any loss by the Ravens, Browns, or Colts. So there's a lot of opportunities for Miami to get in, Brady, but there's a chance that if they don't win at Buffalo, they're going to be on the outside looking in.
Yeah, but you would expect Buffalo to sit their starters. There's no need for them to put Josh Allen potentially at risk. And I can understand the argument from the Buffalo Bills organization standpoint. If they were indeed allowed to have fans in the stands, it would be nice to be the #2 seed, at least to have the chance to host 2 home playoff games. But the problem is you're not going to get to that second home playoff game if you can't win the first one. And if you don't have Josh Allen at quarterback, you're probably not going to. And so the risk to me is too great to play their starters in hopes of trying to lock up the #2 overall seed in the AFC playoff picture. So I think they're going to rest some of those guys. I think you're going to see Miami give their best effort to obviously win and try to get into the playoffs. So I like the Dolphins in this case. I don't know what's going to happen at the quarterback position. Tua's going to start. We know that. Will he finish the game? I guess that'll depend on how he plays. And that may be the best way for the Dolphins to win right now. I do think this hurts Tua Tagovailoa and even the Dolphins in the long run if they continually keep yanking him out in moments where you got to see what you have in the young signal caller. Otherwise, how are you ever going to be able to pick up his 5th-year option or evaluate what you have in this young man?
Wow, you and Pete are on the same step here, because that's exactly what Pete was saying yesterday.
Play him.
Tua.
Yeah, have to play him.
Keep him in.
You have to, because this playoff run is gravy for them. They have to find out if they have a franchise quarterback. You draft a guy that high, it's all about building for the future. Now, I imagine there's some guys in that locker room who are probably like, hey, Brian, maybe we should play Ryan Fitzpatrick to try and win this game and get into the postseason and see what we can do. But the reality is it's not about this year. It's about the future. Tua's not very good right now. I mean, I'm going to put that out there. He's not playing very well. He's holding the ball. He doesn't throw unless the guy's wide open. It's the curse of the young quarterback. Surprisingly, Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow didn't have that curse. He does. But it's still the right thing to do. Who plays quarterback for the Bills? Probably Matt Barkley. And is Matt Barkley better than Tua?
Quarterback scales, Pete. Quarterback scales.
I'll tell you what, Brady. Pete. The way they're playing, the way he's playing, it's pretty even. I don't think Tua Tagovailoa is playing much better.
You're going to regret saying this, okay? We're going to use this. We're going to cut it up and use it later after you just said this.
And I think...
Well, you think he's playing well?
No, but I think he'll play better than Matt Barkley.
Okay.
The betting public, I think, is starting to think that Josh Allen may be sitting this one out as well, because that line is starting to come down. It was Bills -3. Now it's Bills -1.5.
Take
and
the
by the
point
time
and a
this thing, by the time this thing kicks off, it might be Miami.
It's a tough game to pick. I picked Buffalo when I thought that he might play Josh Allen. If he doesn't play Josh Allen, Miami's defense is really good. I get it. So I would probably take Miami. But if they don't win this game, A, there's going to be questions about playing Tua. B, there's going to be questions about Tua. Let's be real about it. 2 games in a row, you know, he doesn't play well. If he doesn't play well in this game, there's a lot of questions about it.
Chris, did Pete make a pick there, or is he still sitting on that fence that he's sitting on right now?
I'm staying with the Bills.
His nickname here is Petey the Hedgehog.
No. I'm staying
Mr.
with the
Hedge.
Bills. No, more like Pete the Hog.
Amazing. All 3 of those games we've talked about are early games on CBS on Sunday, as is this next game. No playoff implications and no number 1 pick implications because the Jets blew it. But they do have an opportunity to beat Bill Belichick here, Pete, and leave the season on a 3-game winning streak. The question is going to be, is that going to be enough to save Adam Gase's job?
Well, you know Joe Douglas likes Adam Gase. You know that. That's a fact. There's no doubt about it. They're close. They're tight. Will 3 games in a row save his job? They had a ton of injuries this year. This team was decimated by injuries as well. And you're seeing the better offensive line play. You're seeing better play by Sam Darnold. I think the defense is playing well considering they have no corners on the outside. So, yeah, I think they win this game. The Patriots are awful right now. You look at that offense, they've scored 1 touchdown in 3 games. 1. That's pathetic. So I'll take the Jets to win this game outright.
Yeah, and that touchdown you referred to, Pete, that was actually Cam Newton on a pass play scrambling. And so it's not even like they can execute the play how it's designed and be able to get guys to separate and get open and then have any sort of efficient passing game whatsoever. So I think the Jets are the team that's playing better football right now. They've won 2 in a row. It really should have been 3-0 if not for the awful call by Greg Williams against the Las Vegas Raiders. And look, if you look at what the Patriots want to do, they want to run the football, whether that's the traditional running game or including Cam Newton as part of that. The Jets are actually pretty decent at stopping the run, and so I think that combined with Sam Darnold back, giving this offense a bit of a lift now, and trying to have something to prove, to me is going to be the difference. And so I know this game's played in Foxborough, but there's no home field advantage there anymore. There are empty stands there. I'll take the 3 points. I think the Jets are playing as the better team right now, and I think, as you kind of heard from Cam Newton after this past week's loss, there's a lot of guys who are just kind of tired. They're worn down. You know how Bill Belichick coaches there. He's tough on those guys. And I think not seeing the results that they were hoping for and now ending the season with a losing record, regardless of whether they win or not, there's not really much more out there for them. So I'll gladly take the 3 points.
Yeah, Brady, do you think Gase comes back if he wins this game?
That's a tough question to answer because for a lot of the reasons you talked about, between the injuries, the other way this team's been impacted, I think, again, if you take out a Greg Williams out of the equation, and even though their offense is going to finish 32nd in the league 2 years in a row now, the reality is you haven't had your starter for the entirety of that. I think if we're being honest, let's all look at this roster and tell me that wide receiver group stacked up against any one of the other 31 teams. Are you going to take that group over anyone else?
New England, the team they're playing this week.
Yeah, literally, it's probably a fair comparison. But even then, I'd probably take New England's wide receivers if Demir Burke could just catch the football after some of the drops we saw last week. So it's not a very talented roster. They have a lot of work to do. Joe Douglas has a lot of work to do. So it's hard. I think this year, too, because of COVID, you'd think that teams and owners would have more patience with their head coaches, especially those that have young teams or those that have a lot of moving parts. The Jets fall into that category.
All right, let's recap the picks from the first 4 games, all of them early on CBS on Sunday. Again, every game is on Sunday this week in Week 17. Agreement on the Steelers, agreement on the Jets, disagreement on the 2 games sandwiched in between. Coming up next, we're going to pick the remainder of the 1 p.m. Eastern Time kickoffs on Sunday, including a game that could decide the NFC East. The winner between the Cowboys and Giants will have a chance, and we'll be watching that Sunday night football game with a rooting interest. Chris Hassel here on CBS Sports HQ, joined by Pete Prisco and Brady Quinn as we pick every game against the spread in Week 17. We are picking 1 p.m. Eastern Time games. We picked the CBS ones earlier, and now move over to the NFC. Brady, we've got the Cowboys slight favorites, field goal favorites on the road against the Giants, and as you know, the winner of this game has a chance to win the division. They'll be in if Washington loses the nightcap in Philly.
Yeah, and we always talk about trends this time of year. Dallas is playing much better. They've won 3 in a row. They're looking to try to get their 4th in a row versus the New York Giants, and they're playing better all the way around. Zeke Elliott's playing better running the football. Andy Dalton's got a better feel for the wide receivers and the chemistry within this offense, just the timing overall for it. And so you can look at their schedule, and we can talk about wins over the Bengals and the 49ers and what that means. But those Bengals and 49ers teams have knocked off some of the better teams in the NFL. So I'm not going to disparage this 3 3-game winning streak they're on right now just because of the teams that they played. The reality is they're playing better football, and better football than the New York Giants have at this point in time. So I'll go ahead and lay the 3 points. I think Dallas gets the win here, and then unfortunately for them, and not to preview what we're going to happen, but I do think Washington's going to win, so they'll be on the outside looking in. But Pete, what if these Dallas Cowboys get a win here and end up going off to the postseason? Would they be a dangerous team to you?
No, their defense is bad. But
would they be the most dangerous of the 3 options in the NFC?
No, absolutely not.
Well, who would be?
Tampa.
Oh, of these?
Of the East.
If Alex Smith is on the field, I think it's Washington.
Okay. All right.
But if Alex Smith isn't on the field, then it's Dallas. But Dallas is going to win this game. I think the Cowboys' offense has come alive with Andy Dalton. He's played better. The offensive line in front of him has played much better. Heck, they should have thrown a parade. Zeke Elliott went over 100 yards last week. I mean, they paid him all that money. It's about damn time he did something. So I think when you look at the Cowboys, they're on a little bit of a roll like Brady talked about. Yeah, they beat the Niners, but the Niners went out last week and beat Arizona, and they beat Cincinnati, who did beat Pittsburgh the week before. So that tells me something. They're playing better. They're playing better on defense. I like the Cowboys. And later on, you'll see my pick for the night game, but it might lean you to believe that the Cowboys might be going to the postseason.
Okay.
Wow.
Yes or no, guys? Brady, you first. The winner of the NFC East will win a playoff game.
No. I'm sorry. I'm not a big believer in that. I know we've seen it before with losing teams who've won the division, end up winning one in the wild card round. That's why there's probably not more of an outcry for the NFL to change how they go about awarding home playoff games just if you win the division, even though if you have a terrible record. So I don't think that's going to happen this year, even though I do think it's going to be Washington, even though they've got that great defensive front. I just don't think they can keep pace with some of the other offenses that they're going to see in the NFC.
No, they're not winning a playoff game.
It is crazy, though, that the Giants could get in at 6-10, host a playoff game, and the Colts, say, could be 11-5 and not even make the postseason.
Entirely different conference.
I know. And I'm not saying not saying they should change it.
It all evens up in the end.
It kind of, maybe.
It does.
A little bit. Colts deserve to be in, though, I think. Let's move on to the Tampa Bay Bucks, and this kind of ties in because the Bucks are at home against the Falcons, and if they win this game, they'll guarantee themselves that 5 spot. And, Pete, that's big, because then you avoid Packers, Saints, Seahawks, and you get to open with the winner of the NFC East.
Correct. That's why the Bucs are going to play hard in this game and play to win, and they should play to win. You want to play the 4 seed, whoever it is it Washington, Dallas, or the Giants, doesn't matter. You'd rather have that game than play any of those other 3 teams. So they will be focused here. I think the offense has really come alive. And granted, okay, they came alive in the second half against Atlanta. They've had problems on defense. They came alive in the game against the Lions, who basically laid down in that game. So you got to temper it a little bit. But I'm going to lay the points here with Tampa Bay because of the motivation. I think that plays in the part of this game, so I'll take Tampa Bay minus the points.
There's no doubt about it. If you can control as a wild card team getting that 5th spot, you do everything you can to get it because it's not going to be a bye, but you do afford yourself the chance to play the worst team in the NFC side of the playoff picture. And so that's what the Bucs have out there for them. That's what they're going to do. They're on a 3-game winning streak right now. They're playing some good football. Even though the rush defense hasn't been quite as good as we've seen of late, that's not going to be a problem against the Atlanta Falcons. So this game shouldn't be an issue at all. I'll gladly lay the 6.5 points. I know we saw a great performance out of the Atlanta Falcons defense and trying to limit the productivity of what we saw in Kansas City. And Kansas City, look, they had to have a comeback win in order to beat Atlanta last week. And I do think Matt Ryan and these Falcons teams, they're prideful. They're going to be able to put up some points. I just don't see them being able to keep it close within that number. So I'll lay the 6.5 and go with Tampa here.
Bucks are starting to peak at the right time with Tom Brady, but when you look at those top 3 teams in the running for that number 1 seed going into the final weekend, would you put Tampa Bay in front of any of those 3 teams at the top?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, and they beat Green Bay early in the year, but no, definitely not.
Brady?
No, I mean, they're not playing this at the same level of the other teams. You know, you might look at a team like Seattle, who at one point was red hot. Then they went through kind of a lull, but now they're starting to balance out. They're running the football better with Chris Carson back. Their defense is playing better. Just ask Jamal Adams. He'll tell you they're the best in the NFL. I'm not sure if that's true, but they are much improved from what they were. So you could maybe make a case with them, but I'm not even sure I'd go that far. They're a wild card team. They're playing where they should be.
Okay, last early game on Sunday that we are going to hit on here. The Vikings are touchdown favorites at the Lions. Vikings not going to have Dalvin Cook. He had a parent who passed away, unfortunately, and the Lions could be final game with, well, listen, there's going to be a lot of changes.
What do you mean it could be?
Good. Okay.
It will be.
Okay.
The whole staff is going. They're having major changes in Detroit, and they should. That was terrible last week. That was an awful performance. I know the coaches weren't there, and I know they had COVID and all that situation. But
trying to be nice for the holidays.
Don't be nice. They should have played better. Show up, at least compete. They were awful. I think they're going to be awful in this game. I think the Vikings will play hard still. Mike Zimmer's that kind of coach. He'll be back next year. So I'll take the Vikings, even without Dalvin Cook. And I hate that he's not there, and our condolences to him on the loss of his father. But again, the Vikings will be focused. Mike Zimmer is going to come back. The coaching staff in Detroit is not. That matters. I'll take the Vikings.
Yeah, the difference here between these two teams is culture. Bottom line, Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman have built that up in Minnesota. And so even without Dalvin Cook and obviously a terrible situation that he's dealing with, our hearts and prayers all go out to him. This team will still be able to overcome what has been a Detroit Lions team that just, you can go back to last week. You can point to a lot of different things. Not having Matt Stafford, though, is a part of that. And even though, you suspect if he plays in this one, he would be able to give them somewhat of a lift, but they're just not even in the same category of team right now. So I think this is a group where Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, who's had a heck of a year, maybe should be in the conversation for Offensive Rookie of the Year the way he's played. They will be able to take care of business versus the Detroit Lions team that is in rebuild mode. There's no other way of looking at it. They're searching for the next head coach. There's going to be a lot of changes that come this offseason. And when that's the case, usually the last game of the season, you're going up against an opponent, even though it's a divisional opponent. It's one in which everyone's probably thinking about the offseason for Detroit, whereas Minnesota, they want to finish on a high note.
All right, in agreement on the all three of these games that we talked about here in the early window on Sunday. Cowboys, Bucks, and Vikings, all favorites. Brady and Pete like the favorites.
Copy of my paper again.
To cover.
They got something to play for. That's why.
True. Coming up next, we're going to move on to the late games. We're going to learn some early. We're going to learn a lot late. The afternoon games at 4:25 Eastern Time. Kyler Murray says he's going to be able to play against the Rams. All right, we've got the late afternoon Sunday games and a lot to get to here, beginning on CBS with a win and in game in the NFC. This might be the most crucial game of the week, and Jared Goff's not even going to be able to play in it. Cooper Kupp's not even going to be able to play in it. The Rams are now underdogs against the Arizona Cardinals. We got Pete Prisco and we have Brady Quinn with us. Pete, I'll give you first crack at this one.
Yeah, this is a tough game for the Rams without their quarterback clearly. Now you don't have Cooper Kupp. But when I look at this game, all we heard all offseason was, or all season, how great their defense is. Well, if your defense is that good, go win the game. But, put it on your defense. This is supposed to be a unit that's special, and they've been really good this year. But I don't think they're going to. I think that this is going to be a tough task for John Wolford. I've watched John Wolford since high school. He's a Jacksonville kid. He's a smart kid. He can throw the football. He's accurate. He doesn't have a big arm.
So somebody knows who he is.
This is going to be
found him.
Yeah, this is going to be a challenge for him. And I don't think that they're going to be able to run the ball. Will Cam Akers be able to go? That's a question that looks iffy as well. So it's Malcolm Brown. I believe in Sean McVay as a coach, but I think this is too many hurdles to overcome. I'll take Kyler Murray over John Wolford all the time. I'll take the Cardinals.
See, I'm taking the Cardinals, and I'll lay the 2.5, but I don't feel good about it for this reason. So, Pete, you talked about how you know about John Wolford. Well, let's elaborate a little bit more. He's a 4-year starter. He's played a lot of football in his time. Maybe not in the NFL, but he peaked his senior year. He did beat out Hinton, the wide receiver who's converted. It was a quarterback that converted to wide receiver who did actually have to start a game this year for the Denver Broncos in order to get to that spot. And look, he looked great in the AAF. Just asked Rick Neuheisel, his coach of the Arizona Hotshots. So he is capable, and I think if you're ever looking at a system where you can plug in a quarterback and you can be able to maximize their talents or abilities, it's the same system as Kyle Shanahan's San Francisco. And if you look at what he did with Nick Mullins or C.J. Beathard at times, it's very similar. So I think as long as John Wolford has a bit of a rushing attack, and that's why Pete pointing out Cam Akers and his health is such a big piece to this, because it's not that Malcolm Brown can't do it. He's just not going to have the same impact that Cam Akers could have. So if Akers goes, I actually think there's a shot that John Wolford could have a decent game and keep this thing close and maybe even pull off the upset combined with the defense. Because Ramsey's going to lock down Hopkins, and Donald's going to be an issue for that offensive line, especially if Kyler Murray is not healthy enough to be as mobile as we're expecting him to be. The problem is that's a lot of ifs. That's a lot of what ifs. I'm going to go ahead and lay the 2.5 points. I'm going to go with Arizona, especially not expecting Cam Akers to be a part of this one.
Rams can still get in even with a loss if the Packers beat the Bears. Brady, we know about about the finger injury to Jared Goff? Are you concerned, if which is more important than just a measly old finger, if they are able to make the postseason, how big of an impact is that going to be just a week later down the road?
Yeah, no, clearly the pins that are currently put in his thumb, they did it in a rush for a reason. I think they want him to get adjusted to it. They want him to get over the pain of what that feels like to have, pins put in your hand. Now, thumb, finger, yeah, the finger actually does matter, especially if it's your index finger. That's probably the most important finger outside of the thumb. The thumb's your second most important finger when gripping the football and helping to control the football when you're throwing it. So there's no doubt he could be limited as far as maybe inconsistent with his accuracy, his ability to throw down the field effectively. Those are all things you're going to be concerned by, on top of the fact that even if he wears a splint, guys knocking into it, landing on it. This is football. It's a physical game. So those are all concerns I think that you have for Jared Goff, but he got the surgery so he would potentially have the chance to play. That's why he got it done now. Otherwise, I think it only would have gotten worse had he tried to push off surgery and try to wait until the offseason, and that probably would have been more debilitating. So he's giving it his best shot. We'll have to see how it goes if they make it in.
So Brady says this finger, index, most important, thumb, second most important. What's your most important
Pete's
favorite?
middle finger is
I know what finger is most important to me. Just yell at me sometime on the street. I'll show you which finger.
I knew that'd be an easy setup for you. All right, so I mentioned that both of these teams can get in if the Cardinals win. Then the Rams are going to be scoreboard watching, potentially, with the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers, because as long as Green Bay beats the Bears, the Rams would still get into the postseason. And the Packers always beat the Bears in these situations. And they still have something to play for because they might need this win to wrap up the 1 seed in the NFC.
Now, if Arizona loses, they're out.
Right, Arizona's out, but both teams can get in if Arizona wins and the Bears lose to the Packers.
And the Bears will lose to the Packers.
I think so, too.
The Bears will lose to the Packers. Look, I give a ton of credit to what's happened with the Bears. I really do. And when you look at what Mitch Trubisky has done, he's really played good football. And we've been some of his biggest critics. You, most importantly, you're the #1 critic.
Well, listen, he's better than Nick Foles.
Well, that goes without saying.
If Trubisky had played the whole season, I don't think they would be in this position right now.
I tend to agree with you. And they've played better football. But this is a Packers team on a roll. This Green Bay offense has never been better. And it's hard to believe that I'm saying that, but I don't think it's been better. Aaron Rodgers has not played better football than what he's playing right now. The best football I've ever seen him play came in a playoff game against Atlanta in Atlanta. It was a magical night of football. The ball never went higher than the helmet level, but he's playing that way now. He's seeing things before they happen. He's the MVP. He will win the MVP, and they will win this game. And the Rams will be happy because the Bears won't be able to get in the postseason.
Some Bears fans might be happy as well because that might fast-track the decisions. And listen, if Nagy gets into the postseason, he might be hanging around.
They're all coming back.
You think they're all coming back?
Chris, if they get to the playoffs, I think Nagy's coming back.
If they get to the playoffs.
I think Pace's come back, and I think Trubisky's coming back.
Brady?
Well, we'll have to figure out the situation with Trubisky. Remember, they didn't pick up his fifth-year option. That was a huge fumble by Ryan Pace. There's really no risk to doing it, only injury only, if he wouldn't be able to pass a physical coming up the beginning of the new league year of 2021. So they put themselves in a tough spot because why would he want to agree to a long-term deal with Chicago when he's going to be able to be a free agent? So then you have to use a franchise tag. We know how expensive that's going to be. So that's the Trubisky predicament. We could talk about that when the offseason comes. I'm with Pete, though. Look, Green Bay's playing really good football, as is Chicago right now. The difference here is, look, they both have something to play for, but Green Bay's playing for that #1 overall seed. So we know how desperate that is. And historically, Rodgers has absolutely, and Chris, you can attest to this, he has diced up the Chicago Bears throughout the course of his career. So I think he'll take care of business here. I think it's going to be Chicago having a hard time keeping pace with the Green Bay Packers, the way that offense is operating right now. I do think the Bears have a solid defense. This game might get off to a slow start, but I think as things start picking up, Chicago will have a hard time keeping pace. So I'll lay the 5.5 points here. I think Green Bay wins the game, and unfortunately for Chicago, they don't make the playoffs.
Sportsline would say differently. Sportsline likes the Bears of those three teams. Bears 79% chance to get in, Rams 75% chance, Cardinals just a 46% chance to get in.
Wouldn't you hope that'd be the case, wouldn't you, Chris?
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know what I want.
You want him in?
I don't know. I don't know. Yes, I guess. Let's move on to the Seahawks, who are in at the 49ers. And the Seahawks still a lot to play for. They could play themselves from the 3 to the 2 seed. They could potentially jump all the way to the 1 seed if everything breaks their way and the Packers and Saints both lose. Pete?
Yeah, and they definitely have something to play for, and they're playing really good defense. And early in the season, they were terrible on defense, historically bad on defense. And kudos to that coaching staff, Ken Norton and gang, for getting that thing turned around. Getting Carlos Dunlap, getting Jamal Adams has really changed the way they play on defense. But this is a division game, and when you play a division rival who's still playing hard, they're not playing for anything, and that's a real testament to Kyle Shanahan as a coach. He's one of the best coaches in this league. You saw it last week. They beat Arizona. They've been through everything possible this year, and I think you're going to stay feisty and tough in this game. Division game, I'll take the 5.5 points.
I'm on the other side of this one. I think Seattle's going to make a statement here. I think they like the momentum that they've continued to build defensively, as Pete touched on, but also offensively and running the football. I think they're trying to prime themselves to get in the playoffs and make a bit of a run here. So, look, again, I think everyone would agree the 49ers have been a more competitive team than we thought they would be after losing Garoppolo and George Kittle for a long period of time, and some of the other star players, Richard Sherman, who's been out. I mean, they've been banged up about as bad as you can be, especially considering their defensive front with guys like Nick Bosa and Solomon Thomas. So, for that reason, it's commendable what they've been able to do. Excuse me. But the bottom line is this is a game where I think Seattle still, much like we keep talking about, they have a lot to play for here. I think they want to continue the momentum that they've built. I'll lay the 5.5 points. I think the Seahawks get a good win.
Public is all over San Francisco in the plus 5.5, according to Sportsline.
Good, with the sharp money then.
Got one more. You guys are sharp. You got one more game in the NFC.
I'm with the public.
He's with the public there.
Brady's sharp. 4:25 Eastern, the Saints at the Panthers. The Saints in the 2 spot in the NFC right now, Brady. They could get the 1 seed if Green Bay loses and Seattle wins, so it's pretty dicey.
Yeah, it's dicey, but again, you still got to play this scenario out, and maybe you get to the point where you get up at half, you can rest the guys potentially in the fourth quarter, depending on what the case may be. But if I have the chance to still qualify for the number 1 seed, you'd be kicking yourself if you ended up sitting your guys, losing the game, and realizing that with a win over Carolina and a Green Bay loss and a Seattle win, which all is very possible potentially, that you could have had that number 1 overall seed. So I think they'll play their starters. I think they win this game. I'll go ahead and lay the points on this one. I think Carolina's been better than we thought they would be this year, but Christian McCaffrey's not going to be a part of this game. He would have been a big difference maker for me. So I think they can protect Drew Brees without having to throw too much, hand the football off to Alvin Kamara a bunch, and then they should be able to win this one.
Yeah, I think they'll win the game, but I think Carolina showed last week something that they're still playing hard. They played well at Green Bay. Then they come back in the second half of that game. They come back and they beat Washington last week. And granted, Dwayne Haskins was throwing it all over the building, but they still won the game. And that tells me that Matt Rule has his team still playing hard. I think the Saints will win the game. They clearly need the game, and there's much more motivation. But I think Carolina will hang around in this game. They'll win by, 4 or 5, but give me the 6.5.
PD Public, he's with the public. Public 84% consensus on the Panthers. Again, it's important to get the 2 seed. You win this, you guarantee at least a 2 seed because that gets you 2 home games guaranteed.
By the way, you say I'm PD Public. I give out a release. They follow me.
That's true.
That's where they go. That's where I'm.
There's no debating that. Let's move over to the AFC. The late games at 4:25 Eastern Time. CBS, Titans at Texans. And the Titans win the AFC South with a victory or a Colts loss. They still have not yet clinched a playoff berth yet. Look at all the scenarios, Brady.
No, there's a ton of different scenarios how this could play out. And for me, look, I hate the hook here at 7.5, but I'm willing to lay it because there is still so much out there for them, obviously, for the division. But, again, a team that shouldn't have any business allowing the Houston Texans to play them close. This is a bad Texans team. Their defense should not be able to stop the rushing attack with Derrick Henry. They should have a hard time covering down some of the pieces, in particular A.J. Brown downfield. Ryan Tannehill should continue to have a very efficient game and take care of football here. So it shouldn't be an issue for Tennessee dealing with this Houston Texans team. This Texan team, again, is much like the Detroit Lions, like we talked about. They're looking on to a rebuilding year, finding their next head coach, finding a general manager, and then trying to figure out how they can get some pieces to help out Deshaun Watson.
Is PD Public on the public side again? Because I got the Texans plus the points.
Well, we haven't seen what the public.
But I'm taking the. I gave that release out on Monday, so they probably followed me. I got the Texans plus 7.5. I think the Titans defense is awful. Really, I like the over in this game.
Yeah, you're PD Public again.
Yeah, well, I like the over in this game a lot. I really do. I think there's going to be a ton of points scored. Over that 56 sounds high, but these defenses are awful. But you know what? J.J. Watt made a passion speech. Did you see it? He called out his teammate. He called out his teammate. No,
he's mocking him.
I'm not mocking him.
I can sense the tone in your voice. That's a mocking.
He called out his teammates, and I think they're going to respond and play well here. They're not going to win the game. Tennessee will win the game, but I'll take the 7.5.
BD Public riding with the public once again on that one. We've got the CBS 4:25 Eastern Time window here, and the Colts are 2 touchdown favorites against the Jaguars. They've got a great chance to get in. The only problem that the Colts have, Brady, is they're the only team of those 10-5 teams that needs a win and a little bit of help.
Yeah, and look, James Robinson isn't going to be a part of this matchup for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not that he would make the difference here in them winning, but I do think he would help them at least keep it somewhat close. But that's not going to be the case. I think Jacksonville's going to have a hard time scoring against this Colts defense. This team, by the way, is the one that needs help, as you mentioned, and could be left out. And Pete, tell me if I'm wrong, but they're probably one of those teams that if they get in on the AFC side, I don't know that anyone wants to play this team. Phillip Rivers, an experienced quarterback who's continually played better, getting comfortable with the guys he's throwing to. They won't have Constanzo for the rest of the year if they do make it into the playoffs, and they won't for this one. So that's obviously some concern, but they've run the football well with Jonathan Taylor. So I think Indianapolis covers this spread. It's a big one, and even for a divisional foe, they'll cover it. The biggest question becomes, do they still make it in? And then what kind of run can they make once they do get in?
But they'll know when they kick off if they have a chance to get in. Because a lot of those games are played at 1 o'clock, the ones that they need some of those teams to lose. So they will know by the time they kick this game off whether they win and they have a chance.
Browns, Ravens, Dolphins, they're all playing at
Right, but they won't know if they can win the division. That's what they won't know. But they'll know if they can win the game. And I think they're going to show up and play well. Remember, the first game, they're going to look back on the season and say, how the heck did we lose to the Jaguars in week 1 when we didn't punt? They didn't punt in that game, and they lost the game. That should never happen. By the way, Jacksonville's not going to play hard here. They celebrated. They had their Super Bowl last week by losing.
Yeah, but they have a cushion now.
Yeah.
Now you can win, and it won't hurt you. You're still going to get Trevor Lawrence.
They're not good enough. They won't win. By the way, Mike Glennon is now, we talk about Mike Glennon, this is his 3rd team he'll be on where they're going to end up picking first overall.
Jeez, pick him up. It guarantees the top draft pick, right? So the other game we have at 4:25 Eastern Time, one of the other ones anyway, the Chiefs. This is no playoff implication game. The Chargers are 6-9. The Chiefs are 14-1. And, Pete, they've already locked up the #1 seed.
And they're not going to play Patrick Mahomes. They're not going to play a lot of guys, which I wouldn't do either. There's no reason to. It's not like this team needs work to get cranked up. I will say this. They haven't been the same this year. And I think, but you have that record, even though you haven't played that well. I don't think they've been the same team as we saw in the postseason last year. We'll see it in the postseason this year, though. I just don't think there's been a rhythm to their offense as it has been, at least in the past. They'll crank it up in the postseason. In this game, the Chargers are going to be the offense that's cranking it up because I think they're going to take advantage of a team that doesn't play a lot of guys. So I'll take the Chargers in this game, and I think Justin Herbert's going to have a big one.
Justin Herbert should have a big game. And let's not forget, too, Anthony Lynn, there's some question on whether or not be back next year. So I think he needs all the help, all the wins he can get. Ending the season on a winning note would be helpful, especially considering they were a team that dealt with some injuries this year. So I'll go ahead and lay the 3.5 points here. Chad Henne is going to be, coming in, taking over to start this game. I don't know that he'll be able to do a ton considering the pieces that they should be missing and if he'll be able to keep pace with the Chargers. So I'll lay the 3.5 points. I think it should be it'll be fun at least to watch Herbert kind of light up the score, but at least obviously missing out on Mahomes. But this still should be somewhat of an entertaining game to watch. What could be maybe next year a guy who could compete for league MVP. Dare I say that, Pete? Is that too much praise for Justin Herbert?
No, not at all. He's a star. He's a star in waiting. The guy's phenomenal. I asked this question the other day to somebody. Would you trade him right now for the #1 overall pick, which means would you trade him for Trevor Lawrence?
No.
I wouldn't either.
Nope.
You wouldn't?
No, you know what you got in him.
Yeah. He's pretty damn good, though.
That's what
and I think my comp for Trevor Lawrence.
You're saying you would keep Herbert over Lawrence?
Yes.
Okay.
My comp for Herbert, by the way, or for Lawrence, by the way, probably would be Herbert, the way he's played this year.
Yeah.
Like that's what you're expecting or what you think he may be as far as the size, arm talent, athleticism.
I agree.
One more game for Justin Herbert. And then the Chiefs will have a week off before they play their first game in the divisional round. Finishing out the Sunday afternoon games, 4:25 Eastern on CBS. The Raiders not playing for anything. The Broncos not playing for anything. If memory serves, I think you had the Broncos in the playoffs, correct?
I think I did, yeah.
Okay. A disappointing season for Denver. This is like 3 or 4 in a row.
He had Chargers in the playoffs too.
You're going to pick out all my bad ones?
Well, I just
the Chargers
you're
too.
You're not going to give me credit for Chiefs and Packers.
Listen, I've given you all the credit in the world for having the Packers number 2.
Buffalo Bills a year ago, I said they win a division.
Let's talk about the game.
Okay.
The Raiders, 2-point favorites in Denver.
Yeah, I didn't have the Raiders in the playoffs. I had the Broncos in the playoffs, and I thought they would take a big stride forward. They didn't. Von Miller went down, hurt the team. Drew Lock was hurt the team. And now he's back, and I think they're excited about what they have. They'll be a playoff team next year. How about that? Early prediction. They will be a playoff team next year. They like Drew Lock. They like their receivers. I think their offensive line has improved greatly. Garrett Bowles probably should be all-pro this year. He's played that well. So I like the Broncos. This is going to be a high-scoring game. The Raiders are terrible on defense. I'll take the Broncos to win the game.
I'm with Pete on the high-scoring portion of it. Even though Vic Fangio and their defense has a way of kind of making these games muddy, running the football, shortening the game and all that, I do think it hits the over on this particular one. But I'm on the other side here. I think the Raiders will be able to put up enough points. They've had quite an interesting season when you really break it all down. And I do think they want to see improvement. They want to get to that 8-8 record, a win better than what they were a year ago, to have something to show. And the fact that they beat the Chiefs this year. They split with them. They beat the New Orleans Saints. They beat some of the best on each side of the conference. That takes some of the heat off of John Gruden, who after 3 years maybe hasn't necessarily delivered upon what they thought. But I think with a lot of defensive changes, additions, obviously they need to find a defensive coordinator next year. This team has a much better chance of being a playoff team alongside Denver, because here's the problem: is Pete picked obviously the Chiefs to make the playoffs, but also the Chargers, also the Broncos. I think the Raiders are the only team he didn't pick to make the playoffs. And I actually think next year the other team that you can bet your bottom dollar on is the Raiders making it to the playoffs.
Could be 4 teams out of the same division with all the wild cards now, Pete. You can get the whole thing in there.
Oh, there you go. Brady, I didn't know Brady picked every run right this year.
He always does.
How about those Browns? Did I not pick them to win 10 games?
You did. You picked them to win 10 games last year.
Go to the playoffs.
Yeah. You picked them to win 10 games last year, so you followed it up.
Year early, as you would like to say, a year early, right, Pete?
Yep.
Let's recap the picks in the afternoon games from Brady Quinn and Pete Prisco, in agreement on the Cardinals and on the Packers, but differing on that Seahawks, Niners, and Saints, Panthers. We got one more page of picks. They both like the Colts, both like the Chargers. Brady does like the Titans to cover that 7.5. But Pete Prisco, PD Public on that one there, going with the public consensus, which is over 85%. The public loves the Texans for some reason to cover that 7.5. Got one more game. Get all those Sunday games out of the way. There's going to be one spot left. Will Washington grab it, or will they open the door for the winner of Cowboys-Giants? All right, so on Sunday, it's all going to come down to that final game, Sunday Night Football, the Eagles hosting Washington. Look, we've made fun of the NFC East, but it's going to be interesting to see. And there's going to be the winner of that Cowboys-Giants game is going to be sitting there rooting for the Philadelphia Eagles, because if Washington loses, that team would be in. Brady, Washington, an opportunity here to get into the postseason in Ron Rivera's first season. What a job that would be.
And I think they actually, again, I think they win this one. What we saw from Jalen Hurts last week was finally some of the decisions, some of the risks that he was taking were coming back to bite him. We saw in the first couple of weeks, but because they won the game, and a lot of people didn't see it in the box score, the stat line, they didn't go back to check the tape and realize he was putting the ball out there at risk to do that. Now he's facing a better defense in the Washington football team. I think that'll pressure him, that will strip the football from him, that will force him at times to hold on to the football and potentially create some negative plays. Now on the flip side, you're obviously concerned about the Washington football team and who plays quarterback there. If it's Alex Smith, this is a no-brainer. I think they'll be able to win this game and score enough points to beat the Eagles. However, if it's Taylor Heinicke, the only good thing I think you can say is that at this point in the week, he is getting all the first-team reps. Smith has not practiced yet. They don't feel comfortable that he's ready yet. So he should be at least prepared with a week's time of preparation to take on an Eagles defense that, outside of their front, Pete, I don't think there's too many things to be concerned about with the back end. They still should be able to put up enough production on the outside to win this game, even with Heinicke at quarterback.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there. This guy was taking classes 3 weeks ago in college classes, and I don't think he's going to be ready to play. If Alex Smith plays, it's a different game. But what kind of movement will he have? Will he be able to move? Because that's a big part of what he does. And I think the Eagles are going to want to ruin Washington's football season, and I think they're going to do it. I think Jalen Hurts will play well in this game. The one big, strong area of the Washington football team's entire team is defense and defensive front. And if Jalen Hurts can move, you think he's going to be able to get away from him. I'll take the Eagles, which means the Dallas Cowboys are going to the playoffs.
And I think most people would say that Dallas is the best chance to win a playoff game. Ready?
Petey Public.
Yeah, Petey Public. He's with the public.
He is the whole time. He's a man of the people.
Look,
he's a man of the people.
No, I'm not a man of the people.
No one would ever mistake Pete for being a sharp bettor. He's a man of the people.
Nobody would ever say that I'm a man of the people. What they do is I release these key releases on a Monday night and everybody follows me.
Yeah, sure they do.
No one's following Pete.
For the record, though, Brady did say earlier in the show he likes Washington as the team that could potentially make the most damage in the postseason if they get in out of those teams from the NFC East. Fellas, thank you so much. It's been a great season.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.